If you feel like your jams lack variety and could use a little extra color, stick around because the concepts I'm going to share in this lesson will be a huge game changer. Hey, Chris here. Just to kind of set this lesson up a little bit, this week I had a live Q&A session, and one of the students, Jeff, shout out to Jeff, requested that I do a deeper dive into this topic that I'm about to get into. It's a gateway into understanding how to really implement diminished patterns, diminished chords, diminished runs into your playing, and then how to situate those in major keys. There's going to be this overarching concept called the family of chords. So this will be my interpretation of it from Barry Harris, where I first learned it, and it's an incredible concept. So I'm going to build it from the ground up. And one more thing, just before we start, I want to say that if this doesn't totally make sense on the first viewing of it, know that you're not alone. That was my experience. It took many times of coming back to this idea and playing with it, and it's still a moving target for me. But just stick with it and just kind of play around with even a couple of the ideas, and you will get something out of it for sure. Also, I'm just shy of 10,000 subscribers, which is a really awesome milestone. If you wouldn't mind hitting subscribe, hit the like button, hit the notification bell, I'd really appreciate it. Now on with the lesson. What we'll do here is look at an open E string, and if we go up an octave, so if you go to the double dot on your E string, you'll have gone up 12 frets. So think of open E as 0, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That right there represents our 12 tones that we have in our Western style of music. What we're going to do to set things up and build this family of chords is take this octave, cut that in half. So half of 12 is 6. So if we go to the 6th fret, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have a B flat. So far, we've got an E and a B flat. Then, if you look at that section and cut that in half, we say, okay, well, what's half of 6? Well, it's 3. Go to the 3rd fret, now we've got a G. And it follows that if we could cut this section in half, this was 6, cut in half to 3, we can do the same thing with this upper structure of it and cut that in half, and then we'd end up with the 9th fret. So we have open, 3, 6, 9, 12. And hopefully that sounds familiar to you, and if you guessed that that was diminished, you'd be totally right, and there's definitely more to come with that in a minute. Let's name those all together in ascending order. So we're going to have an E, and right now I'm going to play them as major chords, but don't be too attached to the type of chord because the quality of chord can change with this concept. It doesn't have to be one type of chord. Okay, so we've got an E, a G, a B flat, a D flat, and then we're back to E. All right, now if we take each one of those individual notes and put them together, we can create a chord, and that chord will be a diminished chord. So let's do that. I'll come down here to an E and play a diminished pattern like this. Okay, so this is maybe a familiar shape to a lot of us, and if not, check it out. It's just like a D chord starting on the D string, do that kind of D chord shape, and then put your pinky finger on 3 of G. In this instance, we get an E diminished 7. And a lot of times, another thing, if I just say diminished, I mean a diminished 7th. I just view that as that's just diminished. Now, the cool thing here is for every single one of these notes that we're playing, if we simply drop one down by a fret, it'll produce a dominant chord. It'll create a dominant 7 chord. So let's go through that and see what happens. So if we go through here and drop the E down to an E flat, now we have an E flat 7. Now I'm going to reset that one, come back up. Now the note that my ring finger is playing, I'm going to drop that down. Just by barring the index finger, I can do it. And do you recognize what dominant chord that is? That's an A7. Now let's put that note back, and now see the middle finger right here. Now let's drop that down by a fret. It's on the 2nd fret, drop it down to the 1st fret. Now we have to change the fingering around a little bit, but no biggie. That one might be a little harder to identify. This is an inversion of a C7 chord. So if you can imagine, a C right there, it's just a first inversion of it. So we've got an E flat 7, we've got an A7, and we've got a C7 so far. Now let's go back to that diminished form. The only one we haven't done is where the pinky finger is. Drop that down by a fret. So it's on the 4th fret. Let's put it on the 3rd. And the easiest way to do that is probably just to bar the index and put the middle on 3 of G. Cool. Now we've got another dominant chord. And again, this is an inversion of sorts. This is an F sharp or G flat 7 like that. If you imagine the root note there, it's a 3rd inversion of that. We've got the dominant 7 on the bottom, 3rd, 5th, and then the tonic right there. Let's pause there for a second. So what we started with was just an octave of E, and I just chose that because it was an easy way to divide things up. So there's nothing special about that E that I started with. It's just a starting point. So we divided that octave up. We got a B flat and then a G and a D flat, and then we had a diminished chord that came out of that. And then from that, we dropped down each note and produced another set of chords. And if you were counting along, you will have noticed that that second set of chords, the dominant chords that were just produced, that also is a family of chords. And now let's look at the pattern there if we take them and go in ascending order. So let's start with a G flat down here. That was one of the chords that we had. I'll play them as dominant chords because that's how we just did them a second ago. And then the next one up was an A7. The next one up from there was a C7. And then the last one, actually it was the first one we looked at, but it was an E flat 7. And do you notice a pattern there again? So we've got G flat going up to an A, going up to a C, going up to an E flat, and that creates another family of chords in a diminished pattern. Those are all minor thirds apart. Okay, now let's take those notes, put them together, and we'll get another diminished chord. So now let's start on the 4th fret of D. We'll do that same form for diminished. So now we can say, okay, that's an F sharp diminished or G flat. And let's drop it down one. So let's take the index, drop that down. Now we've got an F7. Okay, cool. Now if we come back up to our original diminished, take the ring finger note, drop that out, and now we get, and really an easier way to play that is like this. Now we've got a B7, its second inversion. Now let's go back to diminished. Let's drop the middle finger down. So I'm going to replace this note with this finger, and then to drop the 4th fret down to 3, we go like that. And again, it's an inversion of, now in this case, a D7 chord. All right, cool. Now back to diminished, and let's drop the pinky finger down, and it's easier to play it like this. Okay, now that's an A flat 7. All right, now let's do those chords. We have 4 new dominant chords that we just played and produced. Let's do those in ascending order. Let's do from F. That was one that I started with. The next one up would be A flat, and then B7, and these are all 7th chords, and then D7. Okay, right there, we just covered all of the 3 families of chords. So each family of chords has 4 chords in it. And because there's only 12 tones, it follows that if we divide that up, we only get 3 different families of chords. And let me recap what those 3 families are. We've got E, G, B flat, D flat, and I'm just going in minor thirds. You know, in the end, it's just that simple. The next one up, if we start on F, then we have A flat, going up minor thirds in a diminished pattern, B7, and then D7, and then the only one left is the G flat, A, C, and E flat family. Okay, now we're going to get into some of the implications of this family of chords that we just got into. But notice that there's this connection between diminished patterns and dominant chords. That's a big theme in what we're going to get into here for the remainder of this lesson. And just on a fun side note, we just took the chromatic scale basically and just built it out with chords and then grouped certain chords together that work really well together. Okay, so now we've got this foundation set, and that in and of itself is kind of fascinating and fun to look at, and I would recommend just kind of go through what I just did on your own and really kind of trip out over it. It's kind of amazing the patterns that live inside of these things. A little later we'll come back to the family of chords concept, but first let's just look at practical ways to use these dominant chords in the relationship to diminished runs. And the first thing I would say, that probably the easiest place to start is to think of your diminished and dominant runs is either going from a 5 to a 1 or a 3 to a 6. And I'll explain what I mean here. By the way, I have a free worksheet where I map this out and all the keys doing a 5 to 1 and a 3 to 6 as I'm about to show you. So if you want that worksheet, it's free. Link is in the description, so check that out. Let's get to it. So the first key I'm going to start with, and I'll just do a few example keys. I'll start with C. So for C, what we're going to do is say, okay, what would 5 to 1 be? Well, 5 of C is G, and it makes sense, yeah, in the key of C, G is mixolydian, and that would have a dominant chord, but what we're going to do is spice it up a little bit and add some diminished flavor to it, a little diminished color that basically it just adds more tension, which then leads to a more satisfying resolution. So let's come up here to 15 of low E, and we're going to go like this. Play just a regular dominant arpeggio like this. Once you get to this note right here, this is F, and really the note won't matter as much as we get into different keys. Just think of the interval or the shape. Then we're going to plug in diminished like that. Let me recap that whole arpeggio. Notice where we are. We're on 13. We're going to then go to 12 and resolve to 1, which is C. Because remember, our example right now is C major. C is the 1 of C. And what I'm doing is using this last note of the diminished run, or the dominant chord. It's really a G7 flat 9 that we're implying when we do that. The beauty of it is you get this little chromatic movement from this F down to an E, which is the major third of our target chord. One more time from G7 flat 9. And then just think of it like a C shape of C. Now, the other thing I said to try is think of this as not only just a 5 to 1, which is what I just showed, but also a 3 to 6. What I mean by the 3 to 6 thing is that I'm still thinking and framing this as C major based. And so then I say to myself, okay, what's the 3 of C? Well, the 3 of C is E. And what we're going to do is, instead of playing that as your typical Phrygian, which would be a minor 7 with a flat 9 and a minor 6 and stuff like that, what we're going to do is turn that into a dominant chord, which then leads to 6, which in this key is an A minor. And right here, the most important thing to grasp in this whole concept is that we not only get a dominant chord that leads us in a satisfactory way to our major tonic, but also we get a dominant chord that leads us in a really satisfying way to our minor, a relative minor, which is A minor in this case. So let's go to 12 of E. And here's what we'll do. We'll start again with an E7 arpeggio. And then we can just do sort of that same run that we did before. We're going to stop at D and then come down to A minor and descend. So it's kind of cool also because you ascend with one thing and descend with the other. And I always love a contrast in movement. I think that's a beautiful way to get your solos moving. Here we go again from E. A minor. In the worksheet that I mentioned, then I just go to the next key in the circle of fifths, so then you go to the key of G and do the same thing. But in that scenario, you would say, okay, well now what's the fifth of G? Well, it's D, and you just plug in all the same stuff. And then you're kind of C shape for G, and then to create the dominant chord leading to the relative minor, go to B, and do the same thing I showed in the key of C, but now we get to an E minor, which is a relative minor in that key. Like I said earlier, this stuff can feel like a lot, and I would do it in little chunks and just kind of play around with it. And really, I would recommend also don't overthink it or like overanalyze it from a music theory kind of standpoint. Just try to experience it first. Like the first thing to ask yourself is, do I even like the way this sounds? Some people might not like the way this sounds at all, and that's totally fine. If it does resonate with you, keep doing it, keep playing through it, experiencing it, internalizing it, then try to understand what's going on sort of under the hood. I would do that after actually playing it and doing it. So that's kind of my tip on how to approach the practice with this stuff. To start to tie this back into the family of chords concept that I started with, if you really start to think about what's happening here, it's actually kind of awesome. We took a G7 flat 9 to resolve it to a C, and then an E7 flat 9 and resolve that to an A. Now, let's look at the relationship between these chords. So if you take that G7 we were doing, and I'm taking the flat 9 out for a second just so you can really see this really clearly. Well, what relationship does this chord have to the one that we use to lead to the relative minor, the E7? Well, those are in the family of chords together that we were talking about. They're a minor third apart. And then what about our resolution chords? Well, we did a C, and then we did an A minor. And again, those are in the family of chords, a minor third apart from each other. Some of you may hear me say what I just did and think to yourself, wait a minute, the C is major and the A is minor, so they're not in the same family of chords. But again, like I said earlier in the video, the quality of chord is very fluid and can change. It doesn't have to be two major chords matching with each other or two minor chords or two dominant chords. In fact, part of the best thing about this whole concept is the creativity can open up because you're not tethered to making them match major chord to major chord or dominant chord to dominant chord or anything like that. I'm gonna move on to another way to play around with this stuff, and I'm really just planting a seed with this one. This is a real trip. Have fun with it, and hopefully you get something out of this next thing. Okay, so let's go back to the example key of C major. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to play a C major 7, that's my 1, and I'm going to travel up to the minor 2 like this. But what I'm going to do to create some tension and a more satisfying release to the next chord is put a diminished chord in between those two. So I'm going to go like this, C major 7, then I'm going to play a C sharp diminished, and I'm going to go up to a D minor like that. And just to help kind of resolve it, a classic kind of 2-5-1 change, I'll go back to C. Now what I did there at the end, I went from the D minor to a G13 to a G7 flat 13 back. Again, just because it's got some beautiful tension to it, and I like the way it sounds. So, okay, that's a typical kind of movement, I guess. Like that. But now, let's use this family of chords idea to seamlessly change keys. That's one of the biggest benefits, is that you can have these really slick pathways into other key centers, and it kind of opens up different doors. So here we go. Instead of doing what I just did, I'm going to basically copy and paste that, but use the diminished chord as the passing chord, go up a minor third, and get to a different key. So here we go. C major 7. Now I'm going to go C sharp diminished, then E diminished, and then I'm going to go up to an F minor. Now the reason I'm doing that is I'm following the same pattern I did thinking of the key of C, but I'm going to the next family of chords. So remember, C's in the family with E flat. The 2 of E flat is F minor. And that's what I just did. So we got C major 7, C sharp diminished, move it up, and then F minor. Then I'm going to go to that dominant chord that leads it back to E flat, like that. The cool thing about this is that I'm just doing the exact same thing I did in the original spot, but using that diminished chord as a pathway to a different key is a really cool way to get more out of the things you already know. A lot of times it's just leveraging, wringing out more out of the stuff you already have internalized. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the entire process, going through the family of chords, doing what I just did. So again, I'm thinking 1, 2, 5, 1, basically, and just changing keys as I go. Starting on C, C sharp diminished, leading up to my 2, then to my 5, and then back to 1. Now, let's take this diminished chord, move it up a minor third, and then go to the 2 of my other key, E flat, and then the 5th of that one is B flat, and it leads me back to E flat. Let's do the diminished chord, move it up, and now we're on the 2 of G flat, which is in the same family. Do the 5 of that one, which is a D flat 13, or D flat 7 flat 13, and then that leads us to our new key, which is G flat. Do a diminished chord, move it up, and now we've got B minor, which is the 2 of A, which is in our family of chords. Then the 5 of that is an E13. I'll do an E7 flat 13, and it leads us to A, our new key center. do diminished, move it up to D minor, and then that leads us back to the start, which is C. So you can hear it just kind of loop all the way back around through the entire family of chords, all the way back to where we started. One of my favorite parts about that process is that it kind of starts to build these associations and pathways that wouldn't have been obvious. So just for example, it may not have been obvious to grab an F minor, thinking of C. We don't typically do an F minor, although that is a really common change, doing a minor 4 to 1. In fact, that's one of the ways you can frame it, is that you're borrowing a chord from one of the other keys in your family of chords. I just did it where I was doing a 2-5-1, but you can do this with any of the chords. So for example, I could go C major 7 to D minor, and let's say I wanted to go to the 3 chord. Well, instead of just doing that, I'm going to do a chromatic passing chord. So here's D sharp diminished, and then E minor. Now this is the 3 of my key. I'm going to do the same thing, but use this diminished pathway to change keys. So I'm going to go C major 7, D diminished to G minor, which is the 3rd of the next key in our family of chords, E flat. I'm not going to go through every single change right now. I think that I just want to plant the seed with that, and then you can kind of run with it and just experiment with it. It really is never ending, the things that you can do with it. But again, notice at the last example, I landed on a G7. It's kind of cool. Again, that may not be an obvious chord to associate with your C, but it really is a beautiful sound, going from like a C major 7 to a G minor 7. So not only can this help enhance your soloing and improvising in general, but also from the standpoint of writing songs. If any of you out there write your own songs, this can help unlock tons of possibilities that wouldn't have been as obvious otherwise. Okay, I already think there's a lot going on in this lesson and a lot to chew on and dig into, but I want to leave you with one more sort of diminished shortcut to consider, and it's this. In the end, whether you use this family of chords concept I was just getting into, and I really only scratched the surface, there are things like tritone substitutions we can do and all kinds of things we can do. What I would really recommend is play around with the stuff I presented, and then also this last tip is whatever key you're in, try thinking of, or hearing, really that's what I should be saying instead of thinking, try hearing diminished patterns existing on the 2, the 4, the sharp 5, and the 7 of the key that you're playing in. So let's use C as an example key again. So from C up to my 2, which is D minor, and then I'm going to do a diminished run that leads me back to C. It's just a really pretty sound. Now let's try the same concept, but this time we'll do it from the 4th. I mentioned you can do it on the 2, the 4, the sharp 5, and the 7. So we did the 2 already. Here's the 4. Let's say I just kind of walk up to the 4. Now, this may sound counterintuitive because a lot of times we play that F as a major chord or a major 7th or maybe a Lydian style chord with a sharp 11. But then take it as a way to lead you back to your tonic, which is C. So again, C major 7, I'll just kind of walk up to F, and then I'll lead it back to C. Now let's do it with the sharp 5. The sharp 5 of C is a G sharp, and so now I'm going to just kind of walk my way up to G. And now, this is really cool. It creates so much tension because you can see I'm on a G7 right here, G sharp's right here. I'm just going to do my diminished stuff, and it leads me right back to C beautifully. Hopefully it comes across how seamless of a transition that is. Even though it has a lot of tension in it, it just sounds like it makes perfect logical sense. That's the best part about it. Now the last one is the 7th chord. So oftentimes we may think of the 7th chord or the Locrian mode as producing a half diminished chord or a minor 7 flat 5, which it does, but it also can produce just a diminished 7th chord. So here we go. We'll go from the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now we're on the 7. Usually it's that half diminished chord, but now I'm going to do a diminished run. Back to my C. Everything I just did there is equally applicable to the relative minor, which is A minor. You could do the exact same thing and have it resolve to an A minor from the same spots too. You don't have to like recalculate the intervals. Just again, think of it as the 2, the 4, sharp 5, 7. So let me show that leading to an A minor now. So here we go. We'll do a C, go into a D minor, and let's say we want to make our way to an A minor from this D minor. Then we do that same kind of diminished run and lead it to an A minor like that, seamlessly, just like going to the C. So now we're going to go from the F major 7, leading it to an A minor. Now that's a really cool change, kind of a typical change we might hear in a lot of songs. But let's create some more spice with it, with that same diminished run, like that. Just a different way to get to the same spot. Now let's go from the sharp 5, which is G sharp in this key example, and I'm going to just do the same diminished run back to an A minor. Now the only one left that I haven't done is the 7, which is B in this key, so we'll do a B diminished, and then leading back to an A minor. If you've stuck around to this point, thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you have any questions about this stuff, this was a big topic and really just an intro to it. Leave your questions below, or maybe it's not a question. Maybe you can share how you like to use diminished patterns, and we can help each other out in that way. And it's always good to get different points of view and see how different people hear things and think of things and see things. One way or the other, I hope you got something out of it. Even if it's just one little thing you can take and implement into your playing, it'll be well worth it to me. So thanks again, and I'll see you soon.